Hello, welcome everyone. Give it a few minutes here for people to join. If you have any questions or anything, we will be taking those and you can put them in the Q&A chat box there and we'll answer them as best as possible live. Yes, you're all muted. Go ahead and just type any questions you have in the Q&A.
The reason you're all muted is not because we don't like you and don't want to hear from you. It's because there's around 180 people registered for this webinar, and it would be really unworkable if everyone was to be able to talk. That's why.
Then if we don't answer your question during this, or if you would like to discuss anything further, you can reach out to help@timezest.com and we can answer your question there. And I provide free consulting for our customers. So feel free to reach out. Let me know that you would like to meet and we can talk through any specific situations or needs that you have. Okay, so we're about 3 minutes in. So I think what we'll do is I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And Jason, if you don't know already, is our Chief Product Officer, and he's going to be talking through kind of some of the things that the team's been working on and what's coming up next. And then we've left ample time for all your questions. So feel free to send those in as you think of them, okay? Okay, so like I said, we're talking through what's new and improved. We've been working on making things a little more seamless and easier to work through in the last several months. And the first thing we're going to go ahead and talk about is this new vulnerability and how that may or may not affect you in regards to us.
Cool, yeah. So this one's, well, at least easy for us. You've probably all heard about the log4j vulnerability, which is quite serious. It allows, if your systems are vulnerable, it allows attackers to potentially execute code remotely, which is an extraordinarily bad thing. We've investigated our systems. TimeZest is not built on Java, which is what log4j is. It's a Java logging library, so we're not directly affected. And we've also confirmed with all our infrastructure providers that they're not affected as well. So at this stage, we can say quite confidently that we're not affected by this vulnerability at all. So there's nothing to worry about there.
Okay. So let's jump into what's improved.
So yeah, so I will talk firstly about this, the URL generator that we've updated, and I'll share my screen here just to take over from Johanna. I've pressed all the right buttons. You should be seeing TimeZest. So one of the changes we made this year was to, actually that's the wrong one, was to combine what was the old URL generator, which used to be a separate page, which some of our new clients may have no idea what I'm talking about, but it eventually got combined here. And this is what you use when you're building shareable URLs or when you're building URL-based scheduling URLs, which can be used in workflow, sort of email workflows inside Connectwise Manage. So originally you can select the resource on a schedule, and you see all the URLs here get updated, so they can be very simply just copied and used elsewhere. Now, we've actually adjusted the system behind this so it works with multiple resources. So when you're using panel scheduling and you want to have multiple resources on a ticket, it's now possible to do that with all the shareable URLs. So you can add the help desk team, and then you can see that we've updated all the URLs there so that they now have both those resources on the meeting, and you can use that wherever you please. So that's, it's been an often requested feature and one we've been quite happy to deliver. So that's the first little improvement we've made, and hopefully one you'll find useful.
And to confirm, panel scheduling is still up to 3 resources, correct?
It is still up to 3 resources, yeah. That's a restriction just brought on us by just when we have more than sort of 3 resources, the number of API calls that TimeZest has to make in the background to retrieve all the information it needs to display a list of available times starts to grow too large, and we run into things like timeout errors and performance problems, as well as having the horrible user experience of say, an end user waiting 20 or 30 seconds for us to display times. So that's why that limit is in place at the moment.
Okay. Okay.
So what's up next?
Yeah. So the next thing that we have is also another improved, which was our custom availability.
Ah, yes, cool. Yeah, this one I've been wanting to show for a while, because this feature has been requested a lot of times. For those of you who don't know, we have an open roadmap. So if you go to roadmap.timesest.com, and you'll see something like this, which is the features we're working on. And you can also see the list of features that have been requested by other users of TimeZest. Now, we've taken a lot of features requests from this over the last 2 years. It's been a prime source of improvements for us. It will be in the future, and the only real limitation on that is the engineering resources we have to build some of the new things. So unfortunately, some of these have taken a little while to get to, but we do read these things, we do take them on board, and we have built a large number of features that have been suggested here. So this is one of them. So go to users and pick, let's pick me. When we originally built TimeZest, we had an availability model that was the same as what was the one in Connectwise Manage, which was one that simply had, for each day of the week, a start time and an end time saying when the particular resource is available. Worked well enough for a while, but there's the obvious situation where there are periods of the day where you may not want resources to be available, like here. There's a gap between 1 and 2 p.m. for a very obvious lunch break. And that's the change we've introduced here, is to allow multiple blocks of availability on any given day. And it's not just 2, you could have 3 as well. To create them, it's just a case of dragging like that, and we'll add the availability block. And when you hit save, that saves it, and the resource becomes available in those times. So there's a lot more flexibility here now to actually adjust when the resources are available, to actually block out periods of time. You can go down to a gap as small as 15 minutes if you want to, for your morning tea or what have you. And it gives you a lot better control over when we will offer appointments to the end users. So that's been an exciting improvement, and one I hope everyone will find very, very useful. Now, I should mention this is also only available on our advanced and professional plans. So everyone but the users on our free plan will have access to this. If you're on our free plan, you should upgrade to get the advantage of this and many other features that we make available on those paid plans.
Okay. The next thing is new. So we, let's see. It'll allow me to share my screen here. The copy scheduling URL. So
all right. So this one, if you're wondering about the confusion here, is just I can't see my screen when Johanna's showing hers. Hang on, how do I tell Zoom to give me my feedback? So let me just log into Connectwise Manage here. There it goes. So I'll show this in Connectwise Manage, even though I know some of our users are on Autotask. It's very, very similar there. What we have here is also implemented in the Insight in Autotask, and it's almost exactly the same. So I'm sure you'll be able to work out what's going on. All right, so let me just load up a service ticket here.
And a question did come in, and I do want to kind of touch on this real quick, if you don't mind, Jason, because it correlates to the previous feature. So if you use the additional options inside of the pod and you use a range, it will override that custom availability because you've decided to provide the availability that you have annotated on the fly in the pod. So yes, that can be overridden if you use those additional options and you use like a range of time there.
Yeah, that's correct. That's when you use these additional options here. You can say the only scheduled appointment before and after, and you set a time for both of those.
Jason, you'll need to share your screen again.
Oh, that's right. Yes, you can't see what I'm
I'm
saying.
sorry.
That's right. Share screen. No, not the screen. There. All right, there you should be seeing Connectwise Manage, and probably this all works a whole lot better if I do share my screen. So as I was showing you, this show additional options. You can then set dates and times before and after. And in those cases where there's both a start time of day and an end time of day set, that will actually override the availability of all the resources for the scheduling request, but only for that one scheduling request. So it's one way to actually change the availability for one particular meeting, say if you really needed to have it out of hours or something like that. So, all right, so jumping back to what we were talking about, the changes we've made to the pod here. So before, there was just a button here saying ask the client to schedule. I think it actually just said schedule before. So when we set a resource and the appointment type, which you're required to turn it on, there we go. So traditionally, like when you press this button, and when you still do press this button, that kicks off the whole TimeZest process. So when you click that, we'll like retrieve the details from the ticket, we'll create a scheduling request, we'll send an email out to the end user, they can pick a time and so on and so forth. You all know how it works. We've now added a second option here. So if you click the logo, you see there's this generate scheduling URL. And what this does is it creates the scheduling request in TimeZest, but it doesn't send the email out to the end user. Because often we've heard that, technicians or dispatchers, they're working on tickets anyway, they're about to send a note to the end user, and they just want to include the URL. So to say, here's some explanation text about why we need the appointment, and here's the URL you can click to select a time. So if you click that, you'll see what we'll just say that we've created the scheduling request and it's been copied to the clipboard. So it means then, if you want to put it in a note, I'm really hoping that pop-up window is showing in my.
I don't think it is. But it also is good for if you're using standard notes for standard communication, you can copy the URL and put that in there as well, yeah?
Yeah, so you can then paste that URL in the notes, which unfortunately you can't see because of the way screen sharing works. But that means it's then ready to go. So what this does is it just enables slightly different workflows that might be more convenient from time to time, depending exactly how you're interacting with a specific customer about a specific issue. That's available to everyone. And then if you see here, we've added this actions menu, which used to be where the cancel link was. It's still there, so if you need to cancel an appointment, you can do that. You can also now retrieve the scheduling URL, and if you need to get it for any reason, and then you can use it, as I said, in any email, note, what have you. And I was hoping there was one there, but there's not. Let me see if I can find another service ticket, which does have it.
Do all the additional options still work if you generate the URL? Yes. So you'll want to select those options first.
That's correct, yes.
And then generate the URL, and it will honor all those selections that you've made. But you need to choose all your options and then push the generate URL.
All right. No. Trying to find it which has anyway, I'll just describe it, it's easy enough. So we've also added to the links here is just a quick link for where a video call, so a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting has been created with the scheduling request. You can now easily retrieve that from either this action menu, which will say copy online meeting URL, or there'll even be a little icon there, a little video camera icon. Sorry?
I have a screenshot of it here if you would like
Oh, there
to
you go.
see.
You have a screenshot. All right. So
Yeah.
there you
There
go.
you
So you got a
go.
little video camera icon. And if you click those, you'll be taken immediately to the actual meeting in a new tab or a new window. And we did this in response to, because on some big tickets, like where TimeZest was previously writing the video call URL into the notes, which we still do, it was proven to be a bit problematic when you have 30, 40 notes on a ticket. You have to search through all of them to actually find the URL for the online meeting. So now we've brought that up, we've put it right front and center, so it's very easy just to make one click and you can then jump on there.
And you can also copy it under the actions drop down as well.
Yep.
Okay.
Cool. All right, I see there's a question. When using the scheduling URL, will TimeZest still send reminder emails? I believe it will actually. Oh, actually, that's a question I'll have to look into. I can't quite remember exactly what the code does.
I don't.
I'll have to come back to that one. It's a very subtle point. And there's another question. If you send the URL to multiple people, does it allow each to schedule their own time? No. So each URL that's generated here can only be used once. So once one person schedules a time with it, then it's like that's the link to their meeting, and or they can only like reschedule or cancel it. So it's a one-time use URL. It's not like our shareable URLs where you can give them out to everybody and they can be used again and again and again. Cool. One other thing I'll talk about briefly just before I get into what's coming next is that we've launched today our integration with Office 365. So this is, let me share my screen.
I think my PowerPoint's skipping things on me here.
Yeah, I thought we were going to talk about it. But anyway, that's all right. So what this new integration does is it allows you to integrate with your Office 365 tenant and allows TimeZest to talk with the calendars there. So TimeZest can, for each user, be configured to read availability from those calendars so that any appointment on your Office 365 calendar will like block availability for an appointment to be booked. And we can also write to the calendars in Office 365 so that for people who prefer to live in Office 365 and manage their calendar there rather than Connectwise Manage, which generally we've seen that being account executives, salespeople, some of the sort of C-suite people who prefer to live in Office 365. This means TimeZest can be used to schedule for them as well. And even more importantly, where there are users using different systems, for example, you might have a meeting with a network technician who uses Connectwise manages their calendar and an account executive who uses Office 365, you can now send a meeting request from TimeZest with that network engineer, with that account executive. TimeZest will look at both of their availabilities, depending on how it's configured, allow the end user to schedule, and then write the appointment to both their different calendars. So the network technician will get their appointment written to Connectwise Manage. The account executive will get it written to their appointment in Office 365 when it's all lined up and everyone's sort of singing from the same song sheet. So that's easily installed. Just go to integrations, click on there, and then it's the same one-click process to actually install it. You'll be taken to the Office 365 authentication page. That'll tell you like give permission to TimeZest to access calendars and what permissions we need. That has to be done by obviously an administrator of your Office 365 instance. And once you've done that, if you go to your individual user pages, you'll see, so for users which have it, this calendar tab, you can configure which calendars for this user TimeZest uses for availability. So you can say, all right, for this user, turn off, don't read their Connectwise Manage calendar for appointments, but read their Office 365 calendar for existing appointments and then write to their Connectwise Managed calendar. I don't really know why you'd do that, but you could. More sensibly, you might configure someone to, for this case, even if they have a Connectwise Managed account, they want to do everything in Office 365, or you could even turn on both. So there's a lot of flexibility there. We can read from multiple calendars for each user, but we only write to one calendar just to minimize the amount of confusion.
I do want to clarify that these features are available in Autotask as well. Although we're sharing it in Manage, they are available on that platform as well. We have a few questions here. Can you aggregate the availability of a user from the combined data in Connectwise and 365? So if I have meetings in both, TimeZest only offers time that is open in both.
That is absolutely possible. So in this case, you'd have a setup something like this, and you'd tell TimeZest to look at both Office 365 and Connectwise Manage or Autotask for conflicting appointments. And if an appointment is in one of those calendars, it will block out the time. If it's in both, because you're using Calendar Sync, that works as well, and it doesn't cause any problems.
Does that answer your question? Any other questions about how this works that we can clarify for you?
There's another question. What do we do if we don't have an admin Office 365 account? So this Office 365 integration is what's called a tenant level integration. So it talks to the entire Office 365 tenant, like all the accounts in there, and we don't yet allow, say, individual users just to grant permission to their calendar. That might be something we look at in the future, but at the moment, it's not something that we support.
Will TimeZest acknowledge all day events if it syncs with 365? Connectwise currently doesn't when it syncs calendar and causes problems with TimeZest.
Yes. So when we are reading from the Office 365 calendar, all day events work fine. They just block out the entire day from basically midnight to midnight. So they work fine. The various event types in Office 365 work fine. So we basically, I think it's the busy, what's the other one? Out of office, and I can't remember now. Those ones will block appointments. If you have a free meeting time, that won't block an appointment, because people use that event just to sort of put things in their calendar that don't actually block things out, things like birthdays and whatnot. And if you have a tentative event in your Office 365 calendar, then that either blocks or doesn't block, depending on the schedule over tentative setting in the appointment type. So it's the same behavior as we see now in Connectwise Manage, where tentative appointments can or cannot block other appointments depending on how you want to configure that. So should we do, what question should we add next then, Johanna?
Well, I think the rest of these I would like to go towards the end and kind of stick to anything about 365 right now, or this direct integration. Are there anything that we should know about, for those who don't use maybe Manage or Autotask calendars as often? Is there any particulars on how that would work that they would need to know?
Not really. The only thing that I think is worthwhile talking about here, because it's not as obvious as it perhaps could be, is that for the situation where you want to have an appointment type that's only going to be used by, for example, people living in Office 365, so account executives, salespeople, whatnot, and you want to have shareable URLs, it's important to select this option here, so that TimeZest doesn't actually then create a ticket in Connectwise Manage, unless you want that. But my thinking is that most people will not want a ticket in that if they're going to use this exclusively in Office 365. So if you select that appointment, and that will work how you expect it to, is that TimeZest will just create the appointment in Office 365 and do basically nothing in Connectwise Manage.
Brilliant. Okay, any questions about that? Okay, Logan has a question here about, is there any interactivity with shared calendars, or will it only acknowledge the individual's calendar?
So at the moment, it's only the individual's calendar. I think, but I'd have to check that to be 100% sure, but I'm pretty certain it is only the individual's calendar at the moment that we're reading from.
Okay. Cody, with the integrations with Microsoft, we notice this with Teams as well. Sometimes there can be a delay to it. If you see that it's taking like an hour or more, I would just reach out to me at help@timesest.com or the yellow chat box, and I can force a refresh on that and have it kind of pull over again and see if that works. That usually fixes it. Okay. Yes, it will, Dan.
Cool.
Okay. All right. What's upcoming and new, Jason?
So what's upcoming and new? So this is where the majority of our engineering work is going at the moment, and it's something we're calling workflows. And by way of sort of background, it's just sort of where we've come to is, and why we're doing this, is one thing we've realized over the last 2 years, and is that Connectwise Manage, Autotask as well, are actually these extraordinarily flexible and powerful platforms, and they support MSPs with 1 or 2 members up to MSPs with, in some cases, hundreds or thousands of employees. And as well as that, they enable all sorts of different workflows. There's an incredible amount of flexibility there, which the various MSPs and our various customers have used to build these processes that work exactly well for them. And what we're starting to find is that TimeZest's sort of one-size-fits-all way of working through the scheduling workflow, and that's what we see it as. It's a workflow that starts with sending the invite to a customer. They select a time for their appointment, and then TimeZest does various things depending on the configuration. It adjusts ticket status, it writes notes, you'll create, say, a Zoom meeting if that's configured, and so on and so forth. So what we want to do with workflows is basically bring all that so it's explicit and so it's configurable, so that now people will have the ability to fine-tune exactly how TimeZest works. So, for example, like one of the feature requests we have at the moment is getting TimeZest to update the ticket status when reminders are sent out. And that's something we sort of haven't done as yet, because it's one of those things that, do we add yet another, control to the already reasonably complicated appointment type configuration page? So, you think about, sort of from our point of view, when we think about like adding each of these little requests and changes, it starts to become quite unworkable to actually build something that could work for everybody. So that's why we're building these workflows. And they're based around the concepts of triggers, which are things like, triggering a scheduling request in the pod, the end user selecting the time, a certain amount of time expiring without the user selecting a time, and actions, which are sort of the little piecemeal things that TimeZest does. Things like sending an email, updating a ticket status, writing a note on a ticket, creating a Teams meeting. All those sort of things. And by giving everyone the ability to combine those in exactly the way that works with them, there'll be a far bigger degree of control that's available to actually get TimeZest to work exactly how you want it to work. And that's the first advantage of it and why we're doing this. The second advantage is that it allows a lot more flexibility in what TimeZest does. Like at the moment, with using a shareable URL, we create one ticket. But with this new workflows feature, it could be possible, for example, if you have an onboarding process or something like that, when the customer selects a time, you could create 4 or 5 tickets for different tasks that happen in concert with that, and use that to build far more complicated workflows around that. And the final reason we're doing all this is it gives us a really good framework for adding additional integrations. So for example, we know that there's a number of MSPs who are using HubSpot as their CRM system. And that gives us then the ability to do things like, all right, if someone uses a shareable URL to book an initial sales meeting, we could then, for that appointment type, could then be configured to create an opportunity in HubSpot. You create a contact opportunity in HubSpot there, so that's ready to go. And it allows TimeZest to talk to multiple systems when someone books a time. So that's why we're doing all this. We think it's going to be extraordinarily powerful, as well as making TimeZest easier to reason about and easier to customize. So that's sort of that's the big engineering project that's going on at TimeZest at the moment.
Okay, are there any questions about how this might work, or what what you can expect? Does anyone have anything related to the new workflow system that they're working on right now?
So I can see a few more questions and answers here, which I'll jump into. Yep. So Josh Gray has asked, any plans to improve the reporting? Yes, we're having our arms twisted about that. We're thinking about it. What I will probably say at this point is initially what we're going to offer is just the ability to download all the data about scheduling requests in either Excel or CSV format for a selectable period of time. So at least there's the ability then to do their own analysis in Excel, and we hope that'll at least be a stopgap which will give people what they need. Further on, yes, we will be adding more reporting to TimeZest. We know a lot of people are asking for it, but that's probably something we're going to get to after the workflow feature has been launched.
I did see a question regarding workflows pop up in the chat. Logan asked, are there any specific triggers or events you could share with us related to the workflows?
Yes. So the initial ones that we're going to go with is that the triggers will be asking the customer schedule from either the Connectwise Managed Pod or the Auto Task Insight. The second trigger will be when the customer selects the time. The third trigger will be if a period of time elapses without the customer selecting a time. So that'll allow things like reminders and the no response working we have at the moment. And the fourth and fifth triggers are going to be the time, a configurable amount of time before the meeting and a configurable amount of time after the meeting. And that will enable things like, reminders. One of the other use cases we've sort of thought about is, if we want to integrate SMS messaging into TimeZest, that this provides the way to say, all right, 10 minutes before your scheduled meeting time, you can send an SMS reminder to the customer. Or if there's time afterwards, you could use it to say, if we integrate with, say, Smileback, to send a CSAT request, or an NPS request to get feedback on their interaction after the meeting. Those are the initial five. The very obvious, probably sixth one, which I don't think will be launched immediately, but after a little while, is when the ticket gets closed. So,
a follow-up question to that in the chat. I'm sorry, what was that?
What would you use the trigger you mentioned for, like when the customer clicks a time to do? So that's going to be the main trigger. That's like, it'll create the event in Connectwise Manage. It'll write a note on a ticket. It'll update a ticket status, or it can be configured to update a ticket status. It'll send a confirmation email to the technician. That's sort of one of the most important triggers. There'll be obviously default configuration for all this, so that you don't have to build all this up from scratch. So we're going to try and retain the sort of ease of use that TimeZest has while adding a new layer of configurability. But yeah, basically this workflow feature is going to drive the entire TimeZest system.
If everyone could, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A section. It makes it easier for us to kind of track things and keep everything up to par there. Okay, so we had a question about any news on the possibility of Teams audio call in numbers available in Teams meetings scheduled by TimeZest. So the dial-in numbers, I'm guessing, is what Joel's speaking about there.
Yeah, it's something we still need to look at. This, for us, is not as easy as simply incorporating that, because it has to deal with TimeZest's email template system. So there's difficulties there, but we're looking at it. That's what I'll say about that for the moment.
Okay. We did have a question about integrating with Connectwise Control. So is there a future of that coming down the line?
Potentially. So this is one of the things, like, is why we're looking at these workflows, is because it gives us a framework to integrate with additional things, and Connectwise Control could be one of those. So one of these workflow actions could be to create the URL for a Connectwise Control session, and then make that available in an email that gets sent out.
Okay. So we already talked about, let's see, we are part of a franchise and do not have access to the main tenant. So I know that runs into issues with like Microsoft Teams and Outlook. So want to address that?
It's, yeah, I mean, with the Microsoft Office, the Office 365 integration, we may yet add capabilities in the future to add, individual calendars, or just have that, done on a personal level. We can see, certain use cases for that. People, for example, have personal calendars where they have their holidays in, and doctor's appointments and whatnot. But there's no immediate plans to add that functionality. We'll sort of see how the Office 365 integration is released, and then go from there.
Okay, and Logan asked, Connectwise has a I'm in the office and I'm out of the office option on the today page. Do we interact with that at all, or? We
don't, and the reason we don't is TimeZest needs to know that person X is not available between particular time and other particular time, and the out of office feature in Connectwise doesn't tell us that. So because we're always scheduling in the future, if someone is out of the office today, it doesn't mean that they're going to be unavailable, say, next week. So that's why we don't use that particular feature.
Yeah, Logan, I would suggest if it's long, if it's going to be for a long period of time, to build off of your question, what Jason said, I would just maybe either block out their calendar, or, you can even
or even just sort of turn them off as a scheduled
turn them off.
TimeZest.
Yeah.
If there's, for that particular situation where someone might be in hospital for a long time, hopefully not though.
Yeah, I would just toggle them off. Okay. Any other questions that we can address for you guys about what features we've covered, or any requests that you have, or anything like that? George, we did touch on the Teams dial-in number, and that's not available right now. It's a little more complicated for us to get out at the moment. Okay.
Cool. So
nothing.
Right.
Okay.
All right. And one last question: would it be possible to get a variable that includes a no hash symbol for the ticket number? Yeah, we'll add that at some point. There were some changes how we stored ticket numbers internally. Just that particular little thing got missed. So yeah, we will get to that soon. It's not a particularly big feature, so watch out for it. A question from Rex. Is there a way to designate when someone will be in the office and schedule tickets that require being in the office? No, at the moment. I mean, the only way that could really be done is on a per scheduling request basis, so that if you know when the person is going to be in the office, you could use the scheduling, the additional options feature in the pod there to actually limit the times when the end user can schedule to the times when that person is going to be in the office, but there's no general mechanism for that.
Okay.
Cool.
I want to just remind everyone that if you do want one-on-one assistance, you can reach out to help@timezest.com. And if it requires a call, I'm happy to jump on a call with you and work with you. We can schedule that. We do offer free consulting to our customers. So that's an option if you want to talk through any specific use cases as well. Any other questions or anything? No, it shouldn't duplicate calendar entries.
Yeah, so just to address Cody's question, which is saying if you have a sync between Office Calendar and the PSA and have it write to both, you'll see duplicate calendar entries. Yeah, that we don't do that. And that's why the setting is only possible to write to either your Connectwise Managed Calendar or either your Office 365 calendar. We won't write to both for exactly that situation, that you will have duplicates of duplicates, even if you have calendar sync turned on. Cool.
So yes, Logan, that is available to everyone on the professional plan already. That was released this week. So you can log into integration or log into TimeZest, go to integrations, and you'll see it there. And then as we showed earlier, that is managed underneath the individual user's configuration, where you can select, which calendars to read and which one to write to. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or anything we can help with today?
One more question. I'm still not 100% sure whether to utilize 365 or Connectwise Manage. Is there a sort of pros and cons chart of doing it either way? Not really. I mean, with TimeZest at least, which is just using whichever calendar you live in and use as your primary calendar, and perhaps more than that, we'd suggest you just have a primary calendar. If you're having like 1 foot in Connectwise Manage and 1 foot in Office, that's probably not going to be workable for a whole lot of reasons, not just TimeZest. So yeah, but beyond that, I think just experiment, find what works for you. Like different people use TimeZest in use Connectwise Manage and Autotask in different ways. They use Office 365 in different ways. We've seen the whole spectrum of different options, so that's what we're trying to support here. Yes, thank you, Georgia. If it's not in Connectwise, it never happened. Yes.
I couldn't help but laugh at that. Thanks, George. That's awesome.
Cool. So, do we have any more questions, or if we do, I suggest getting them in really quickly. Otherwise, we might wind this up.
Yeah. Yeah, Jeremy makes a good point. Especially for your help desk, you want that information in your ticket and in your PSA. So having your support, your help desk team have their PSA calendar be their primary would be best practice. Typically, you'll see sales teams that will leverage their 365 account more often, but definitely for support and help desk, you really want all that information in that audit trail to be located in the ticket, because we do track, when the invite is sent, when the client schedules, if it gets canceled, and who cancels it. So we want that log of information to be inside the ticket. So that's a very good point, Jerry. Thank you. we have the Connectwise, there's calendar integration, so it gets complicated. Then do we integrate Busy Calendar to manage our 365? Are you talking about the sync between the two, or I'm confused?
Yeah, I think
Maybe you get it,
what
Jason.
Dan's talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't make any difference to TimeZest. So we've designed this feature so it works when the sync is turned on, when the sync is turned off. And so as long as an appointment appears in one of the two calendars, if you're talking to both, then that will be enough for it to block out the appointment and not make that time available to end users.
Mm-hmm.
If the appointment appears in both, that's completely fine. That doesn't cause any problems either.
Logan asked, will TimeZest still update notes in Connectwise about appointments sent, calendar entries, etc., if we change the calendar sync to 365 instead of to Connectwise?
Yes. So where like TimeZest knows about a ticket, so if the scheduling request is kicked off in Connectwise Manage, then there's already a ticket associated with the scheduling request. Then we'll write the notes there. And even if one of the resources for the meeting is using Office 365 as their calendar, we'll still write the note on the ticket. But in the situation where you're using a shareable URL, if that's not configured to create a ticket, then there's no ticket associated with the scheduling request. And in that case, obviously, we don't write a note.
As a reminder, this is being recorded, so I will be sending out the link to the recording to everybody who registered. And then it'll also be on our YouTube channel. And if we didn't, if you come up with a question later, like I said, send it over to us at help@timezest.com. We really want to make sure that those questions get answered. And then real quick before we log off, we have 2 questions that snuck in. Now they're all coming in.
So for Chris Cunningham, do you have the ability to schedule over tentative service calls versus firm? As far as I know, there's actually no concept of tentative service calls in Autotask. We looked into this when we were developing the integration. We couldn't find certainly any way to actually even create them in Autotask, let alone get that information through the API. So that's the answer to your question, Chris. And then
Gavin, will TimeZest detect if the meeting gets moved into 365? If the meeting's in 365 and you have that on, it will detect the meeting in there, right? So if you have it marked,
what Gavin is talking about is if someone reschedules in Office 365 and TimeZest doesn't detect that because we don't get any notification of a new time or a new description or anything like that. In that case, we'd want people to use the reschedule link in the actual email, because that way TimeZest gets notified about it, and then we can take all the necessary actions, writing a note on the ticket, updating other users, and so forth.
That's a good point, because TimeZest does not, if somebody uses the accept or decline in Outlook, TimeZest does not read that. So that's
we don't even receive it. So yes.
Yeah. No, Logan, he just went over that. There's no issues that you should run into if this sync is on. I think that's it. All right. So awesome. What we'll do is we'll wrap this up. And what we'll do is if you have any questions that we didn't get to or anything like that, like I said, send them over to help@timezest.com, or when you're in TimeZest, that yellow chat box goes to our support as well. And we'll try to address all those then. And we look forward to working with you guys in the near future. So thank you everyone for participating and joining us today.
Right. Awesome. Thank you, everyone.